Yes! Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is, and welcome back. I hope that your Friday is off to a beautiful start and you're bursting full of energy. We've got some serious business to attend to today, and we're going to start with a Biden bombshell. So, quick preview on what's coming up, then we'll zoom in for further detail. But a big set of documents just dropped, courtesy of our friends over at Just the News. And we're excited about this one because we've got a lot of questions about the propriety of Joe Biden's pardons, whether he was even in the room when they were talking about him, and whether they carry the weight of the presidential authority. And there's a lot of people who got these pardons. In particular, we're talking about Liz Cheney, Pencil Neck Schiff. Remember him? We also got Fauci and many others who may be subject to this. And so a big drop came down. So bombshell memos now out. We'll look through them. You can see we got 24 pages of juiciness. And these are all memos that were sent around inside the Biden White House to each other. They're saying, well, you know, we should probably have Joe there. And then they didn't have him there. So not great. And so we'll go through it. We'll see what's inside and we'll get some reaction to that. Because this morning, there was actually this dude who was coming in for testimony and doesn't look like he's going to say a whole lot. The way he's kind of, putting his head out there, nice and proper, how he's handling that. We'll see if there's any updates on it, but James Comer was also out explaining that, man, they are on this baby hard, and we're excited about that. So all coming up. Then we're going to talk about Lisa Cook, because yesterday we looked at a little bit of her response. Now we've got the DOJ's reply. Actually, it's a supplement. Remember, I think the court asked them to respond to some of this. And so we've got more. And then we've got Lisa, who wants a surreply. And so we've got this little sandwich that we're making. She says, put me back in there. And Trump said no. Then she said yes. And now Trump is filing a supplemental. She wants to file a surreply. And so we're still, fleshing out the briefing before we get the decision from her sorority sister, Gia. So we'll see what the DOJ said, because they came out here, man, and they made this so simple for us. They put it in bullet points. They're like, Lisa, we know you're not that bright and you can't read your mortgage documents in paper. It's complicated for you. So let's put it into bullet points and see if that will resonate. So we'll go through it. Then we've got another big report that is now from the Office of the Inspector General. Looks just like this one right here, coming out of the DOJ. And it's about this guy, McGonigal, and we know him as a former special agent in charge of counterintelligence at the New York office. And he was doing some real funny business with Patrick Ho over from China. And where did that end up? With Hunty Poo, of course. And so we'll go through that. He was Hunty, enmeshed in all sorts of corruption all across the country, world, really. And we got now news on it. So we've got the OIG report, which has come down. And we're excited to look at it, see what's inside. Reaction on this from the Oversight Project. And of course, Kash Patel was even talking about the Chinese and drugs and all sorts of stuff. So we'll go through that. And then we got a little bit of an update on the E. Jean Carroll case. You remember this maniac, crazy woman, in our opinion, who made up a bunch of stuff. And she was the same lady who painted her trees blue, and she calls her cats names like vagina or whatever. And now her case is getting appealed. Remember, she got that big fat verdict for some made up scandal. She said she got Bergdorfed in a dressing room at Bergdorf's. All right. 20 something years ago, or it was like 23, or it may have been 24. They can't really remember. No other witnesses. And so they issued like $100 million against Trump for like defamation and assault and all these things. Trump's taken it up to the Supreme Court. This was the case. We had a lot of funny business going on in the E. Jean Carroll case for sure. So bunch of stuff to get to today, my friends. It is a beautiful Friday. We made it through another busy week, and we're very glad that you're here. Membos, stick around. So we're doing one stream today because your boy's kind of jammed up this afternoon with some other business I got to attend to. And then after the show, we'll do an after party, and then tomorrow we'll be back for our members only stream. So thank you for becoming a membo. Thanks for joining us after the show's over to debrief and see what you're up to this weekend. So we're going to have a great stream. Thanks for being here, my friends. Thanks for your support. Thanks for subscribing, liking the video, all the things. We were grateful for it. Now, let's get to it because we've got a bombshell memo to attend to. Bombshell memo now released. We got this one courtesy of Just the News. And as you can see, It says that Biden aides had one position on how the pardons should be effectuated, and that really didn't happen. And in fact, it turns out Joe Biden may not have even been in the meetings where they were discussing these pardons. And so how can they carry the weight and the heft of the executive branch, of the power of the presidency? They can't. If the president didn't actually review anything and authorize it and stamp on it, then it's invalid, is the argument. And the memos show the back and forth that occurred from inside the Biden White House. They're sending letters and emails, communicating amongst themselves, and then they report to us the following, saying, Just the News got these documents saying that at the beginning of the administration, that Joe Biden's aides believed that he had an obligation to personally sign these presidential actions, okay? He comes in, he's like, no. They're like, can we just auto-pen like everything? Like, no, he's got to sign some of these things. That's because, he's the president and it's a symbolic confirmation that it's his approval. And chronicle in these emails how the former president later outsourced all of those decisions to Kamala, which you can't do. She's not the president, never will be. Now, the memos were gathered as part of a sweeping review by the Trump White House. So they're digging into it. They're like, oh, well, we'll just look at your emails. We'll just look at your email account since we have them now. And now it's raising new questions about whether Joe Biden even actually attended 4 meetings that were all dedicated to making these decisions. It included preemptive pardons for family members, as well as commutations for federal death row sentences. Now, the National Archives was digging this stuff up. Let's dive right into the document. You can see now published, courtesy of Just the News and others, explaining here. We've got this email, January 17th, looks like a memo rather, from the Biden-Harris stolen transition team. Oh gosh, kind of like flashbacks to this. This is a memo. Soon as they're getting ready to come in, right? Biden will be sworn in on the 20th. And this is a memo for the director of the Office of Records Management. And the subject is approval for presidential signatures. So how do we handle Biden's signatures? Well, the following individuals are authorized to approve use of Biden's signature pen in areas of responsibility as noted. Wow. So the chief of staff can sign everything. Staff secretary can sign everything. Deputy staff secretary can only be signing things that are under the staff secretary. Then the executive clerk goes under the staff secretary. And these other people have different responsibilities. Now, if individuals other than those seek authorization, send them to me, okay? But the chief of staff and the staff secretary can just sign documents to approve use of presidential signature pen in areas of responsibility. Wild. So if individuals other than those want approval, let us know. We're not going to give you verbal authorizations. This memo supersedes any item on the same subject. So that's before he comes in. Then we get another decision memo. So this is February something that happens in 2021. So just maybe a month later. We don't have the exact date. Here's another memo for the president now. It's not the transition anymore. It says, we are now approving the routine use of document signatures by Autopen. It says, here's the statement of the purpose of this memo. Writing, this memo proposes general guidelines for which documents should be hand-signed by you and which documents may have your signature affixed by use of the Autopen. And this is for the president. Okay, so the you is Joe. And it's funny because remember on his little cheat sheet cards that they used to give him, he would say in that, we would see the text that would say, you stand here. You introduce yourself. Then he will introduce himself. And it was like paint by numbers. It was ridiculous. Now, in addition for documents that we recommend to be signed by the Autopen, this memo proposes narrow categories of routine, high-volume documents, like what, presidential pardons, that may be approved by one or more of your, Joe, he's like, me? Yeah, your senior advisors and executed with the Autopen on your behalf. This memo also provides a proposed update of prior Autopen guidelines that you approved during the transition. Remember? He's like, no. These recommendations are intended to provide a framework for a more efficient signature process for you. Okay, so some of this stuff should have your signature. Some of this can have the Autopen. Now, Based on precedent from Obama regarding documents, which documents are generally hand signed by the president. Okay, so follow the Obama tradition, not kind of skipping over Trump. Our recommendation is that as a general rule, Mr. President, you personally approve and hand sign all decisions that require presidential action. That's a lot. Those proposed categories are bills, veto messages, State of the Union, highly personalized or even customized correspondence that you want to share, mass casualty, military condolences, Presidential Medal of Freedom citations, Medal of Honor, departure photos, presidential commissions, cabinet level commissions, agreements with the foreign government, and pardon letters. Wow. Other ceremonial items that are objects rather than paper, you can sign those, and other documents that you choose to hand sign, Joe. You have an option. Now, again, based on precedent, our recommendation, Joe, regarding which documents generally may be executed by Autopen and on your behalf are as follows. So all of this, including pardons, you should hand sign it. So what happened? Now, they swapped it, and the Autopen was just going like the Federal Reserve printer. Constant. Our recommendation regarding which documents generally may be executed by Autopens are the following. Executive actions that are not associated with a signing ceremony, personnel appointments or designations, there's like 10,000 people, right, in the executive, foreign leader correspondence and holiday cards. So if you're going to send something, a nice little message to Putin, commemorative proclamations, general correspondence, annual reports that the law requires, photographs not associated, renewals of national emergency declarations, not the new one, but the renewal, and federal disaster declarations, which those seem kind of strange. Like, why wouldn't you want the president to sign that? Anyways, maybe because it's quick. It's like, well, bomb went off over here. There's a national emergency. Yes, I approve it, but sign it. And you presume that even for these, it's not like just carte blanche, okay? It's not just like, well, I have permission to do it, so I'm just going to start sending a bunch of letters to my family members, courtesy of the President of the United States, right? Not going to be anything like that. Now, based on procedures followed during your presidential campaign and when you were vice president, we propose a limited exception for certain categories of high volume or routine materials that instead of requiring your personal review, could be approved for use of the Autopen by these people. Okay, so now you were VP when we proposed a limited exception. And what is this exception? For certain categories of high volume or routine materials that instead of requiring your personal review, could be approved for use of the Autopen by your staff secretary's office. Okay, so we got names here. Jess Hertz, Michael Hockman, Chief of Staff's office, Ron Klain, Bruce Reed, and Jen O'Malley Dillon. Wow. So we got like 5 presidents now who can just kind of follow a limited exception. Both staff secretary and chief of staff offices and their use of Autopen for these limited categories, absent your prior approval, would be authorized only after consultation with the Director of Oval Operations and pursuant to other limitations that you choose. Okay, so Joe Biden can kind of delegate some of this to Oval Operations, and then they can delegate some of that to the staff. And here's what you can use this for. Certain sub-cabinet level designations by acting officers and other routine personnel actions can be approved by your chief of staff. So, right, so Biden would say, well, I'm approving you to do these things. I'm delegating this power to you. I don't need to personally sign all, 5,000 higher positions. But commemorative proclamations that are unlikely to garner significant media attention, as long as there's no new policy ground, they can be approved by your advisors. General correspondence, they can sign off on. Renewals on national emergencies, again, can be approved by Deputy Chief of Staff. What the heck is going on? Federal disaster declarations can be approved by your Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, subject to your consultation. Okay, so there is we get a little bit of, like, I'd like to see that on every sentence. Can be approved by your Deputy Chief of Staff? How does the Deputy Chief of Staff have the power to reapprove a national emergency. I mean, shouldn't that go to the president? So here's their recommendation. All right, Joe, Dementia Joe. We recommend that you approve, 1, the proposed categories of the documents in section 1, and you acknowledge that you're going to put your hand signature on these things. And 2, the proposed categories may be executed on your behalf with the Autopen, which includes some national emergency stuff, and the proposed narrow categories of documents that generally may be approved by your other advisors. Now, of course, Mr. President, such decisions are subject to any specific exceptions or circumstances you prefer at this time because, you know, you're the president. And he didn't read this even. He's like, okay, I don't even know what that was. That sounds good. Yep, sounds good. Is it ice cream time? So we continue on. Then here's another memo. So then this one changes. Okay, so we fast forward quite a bit of time now. Now we're inching closer to the end of Joe Biden's presidency. His dementia's on full display. And now there's this memo that comes out from the Deputy Associate Counsel over to the Associate Counsel, so like an underling to a boss, copies Senior Legal Assistant, shout out to the legal assistants, and Special Assistants to the White House Counsel also gets notified. So the White House is getting this as, well, it sounds like it's probably Associate Counsel for the White House is what we would guess. Briefing memo, the White House counsel in the executive branch. Now, here's the statement of the purpose. Okay, this memo to everybody details the process that members of the White House clemency team has followed for clemency and pardon packages. This is the process. This is how they did it. Okay, I'm just letting you know. While no review is identical, my understanding is this general pattern has been consistent throughout the term. Here's the process. Well, the White House does an initial scoping. Should these people, you know, be considered? Should it be murderers, drug addicts, whatever? And the clemency team is going to meet with senior advisors. Soon after the announcement of the previous one, they meet with senior advisors and they discuss the plan for the next round of clemency recipients. They're like, all right, which one of our donors need it most? How much have they donated? Clemency team comes to the meeting with a proposed approach for the next rounds of clemency, and they get feedback. Although clemency team has previously proposed categorical clemency actions, like so all the Hunter Biden crackheads are immune, senior advisors have preferred to focus on individual review and the appropriate criteria for that review, because you got to look at each case individually. You can't just say, well, everybody is pardoned, right? White House counsel, I think even though Jimmy Carter did that, White House counsel's office, Ed Siskel, White House counsel and others were there. Bunch of names in this list. Neera Tanden, you know who she is. Stephanie Benjamin, some mayor. All of them are coming in. We want pardons for these people. So they have these little meetings, right? These little review sessions, these scoping meetings. Then the DOJ makes a recommendation. So the DOJ's Office of the Pardon Attorney then prepares a package of clemency and pardon recommendations consistent with the guidance from the advisors. After the package is cleared by the ODAG and signed by the deputy attorney, Pardon, the lawyer, then transmits the recommendations to the White House. Now, this often happens on a rolling basis as pardon and the reviews are processed. So then the White House clemency team, then they review a more fulsome recommendation by the DOJ. They get summary briefs and all of it goes to the Justice and Equity team. Look at this, a racial justice and equity team. Remember, we used to live in a country like that? What a ridiculous thing. And the White House counsel. These summaries offer an initial recommendation on clemency and discuss whether they align with the criteria. So then we get adjudication and deliberation. So the White House clemency team, which includes RGE deputy, reviews the recommendations and discusses the candidates for the first time right here, individually. The White House clemency team then agrees on a package of the clemency recipients for the White House counsel to review. Then after the White House determines which petitions, White House counsel, okay, so like not the president, they determine, so a decision is being made by somebody, which petitions to approve and advance, like a little filter system. Now, the president doesn't have to review and sign every pardon request. So you can say, yeah, no, bring me the good ones and I'll look at those and then I'll exercise my decision on those. And so I think it's appropriate to have, like a filter team. The question is, are you executing on the pardons that are being effectuated? So the White House team then circulates an email to senior advisors with the petition summaries, a top lines document that provides demographic data of the package. They're like, well, we need a lot more black people in here. The draft comms material, such as draft presidential announcement for the package. Then the clemency team gets questions, convenes a meeting, and they review the petitioners, the people who want the pardons. Then they summarize the petitions. They highlight difficult cases. Now, at this stage, senior advisors may approve some or all of the candidates for the president's review. That makes sense. Alternatively, depending on considerations like timing and a number of candidates, they may decide to hold the package altogether for a later date. They may also ask for more information. Now, here's the note. In past situations, senior advisors have initially approved certain petitions at this stage, only to raise concerns later in the process. Like, well, this sounds good. And then you vet it more like, actually, this dude doesn't deserve it. Unfortunately, this has caused delays. Now, in these meetings, the vice president is represented. So Kamala is there. She's not there, of course, because what's she going to do? So her lawyer, Erica, comes in. Before a decision memo is transmitted to the president, the vice president has previously requested to review the petitioners individually and has raised detailed questions with the clemency team. This has also introduced significant unexpected delays. Why is Kamala coming in here and trying to meddle in this process? Significant unexpected delays, and therefore planning for VP's individual review will likely help expedite the process. So like we got it, she's going to come in and shove her nose in here because she's Kamala. So the staff secretary has also traditionally not been included at this stage. Last round, however, staff secretary pulled 2 candidates once the president's decision memo reached their office. The current staff secretary also holds domestic policy equities as head of the Office of Gun Violence, and so they would also help avoid these disruptions. Okay, so we still haven't gotten to the president yet. Then the White House counsel does some vetting. Once senior advisors approve the package, then the clemency teams vet the petitions. This vet includes reviewing a bunch of things. Do they have any liens on their property? Do they have any past convictions? Is there any negative media coverage? Are they on social media running their mouth? Are they going to be a problem for us? We also ask Pardon and the lawyers over there for an update on any infractions. Did they do anything bad while they're in custody? And then they review, they flag anything that's problematic. The White House counsel is generally not consulted at this stage. And each vet is fairly time intensive. Yeah, taking about an hour per petitioner. Yeah, did you guys have anything on him? What'd you guys find? Depending on how much time passes, they may re-vet the candidates as well. So then we progress. Then the clemency team prepares a decision memo. Okay. For the president, outlining the proposed clemency package with the recommendation summaries in this big report. The package has previously been prepared with the proposed announcement of other clemency and policy programs. So you don't just come out, pardon a bunch of people, tack it onto something so it's less offensive. Once the memo is cleared by the White House counsel and the deputy White House counsel, it's then circulated to senior advisors. Once senior advisors clear the memo, it then goes to the staff secretary. And then it undergoes many rounds of stylistic edits. Like, gosh, like no wonder nothing gets done in our government. As noted above, at this stage, the vice president has personally reviewed the petitions. Okay, she's not the president, so that's great. And also, as noted, the last round, as we get to this round, the memo was held for weeks during the staff secretary's review. And we've been assured this is not going to be the case going forward. So somebody said, you got to go fast. Once staff secretary declares the decision memo, then it is sent to the president for approval. Now, given the president's schedule, it can often take days or weeks for the president to review and approve the clemency package. And so the chief of staff has been helpful in getting the paper in front of him for his review. Here, Joe, put this pen in your hand. He has previously asked the White House counsel to discuss the candidates with him, although in the last round, the vice president's approval was sufficient to obtain his approval. Okay, so Kamala comes in, says, I love these people. Joe's like, all right, I'll take your word for it. I approve it because you approve it. Feels a little bit, a little too delegating, but I still don't know that that's a problem, right? If she says, no, I'm going to take your advice. What do you think? You've done the review on this? Great. I'll sign off on it. But he's got to, review it, sign it as they recommended, and go through that physical process. Thank you for telling me. I am now up for this person. Great. For that person. Great. Now, rollout. While the decision memo is with the staff secretary and the president, the clemency team then meets with comms, OPE, OLA, and they plan to roll it out. Depending on the context, we've taken various approaches to public-facing rollouts, depending on who's getting pardoned, I guess. The clemency team has drafted responsive TPs, hard Q&As, a presidential statement, because they got to come and explain all of it, and more. Now, once the president approves the package, the clemency team notifies the pardon and the ODAG, which coordinates notifying the Bureau of Prisons to tell the recipients the day before the announcement, you're going to get pardoned. Congrats. Pardon also prepares the warrant for the commutation, and then they notify the staff and the media the day before the announcement so that everybody can come with their cameras. Then, the day of the announcement, the White House clemency team coordinates the president's signing of the warrant and the delivery of the warrant by courier to the pardon attorney. Now, the same day, the White House posts the recipient list and any accompanying presidential statement as well. And that's the process that's been going on. And this is curious. There's a bunch of these comments, people saying, does Ed play a role in this? As noted, we've been asked, what does this mean? What does pre-notify mean? Pre-notifies are alerts before the announcement so they can be prepared for the rollout, all just kind of conversational stuff. So sounds like a pretty normal process. Like the president delegates a bunch of the decisions and then can even, take advice before making the decision. And then he does make the decision and he approves it and signs off on the package. Like, oh, sounds pretty, pretty standard. Here's what we've got. Now, as this continues, we have this one now, December 11th, 2024. They have now lost the election. Trump's coming in. They're freaked out. So this comes from Rosa at the Executive Office of the President, White House. And she sends this over to other people at the Executive Office of the President, all listed here. Copies a bunch of people, mostly same divisions. This is about the presidential decisions on clemency and pardons. Here we go. COS Chief of Staff Jeff Zients got POTUS's verbal approval on the following decisions during a Thursday, December 5th decisional meeting with POTUS. Here's what happened. They've got some, they wrote this in a memo. President approved categorical commutation of the sentences of individuals on the CARES Act home confinement who have demonstrated good behavior. It's 1,500 people with the final number to be determined by the Bureau of Prisons, okay? So it's broad and categorical, and you might say maybe he has the authority to do that. But you don't even know, like he can't sign off on all of them because it's an indefinite number. We don't even know who's getting them. So President also approved pardons for 39 individuals, former military service members and survivors of domestic violence who committed nonviolent low-level offenses and have demonstrated significant rehabilitation and contributions for the communities. Okay, so did he approve all of those individually? That's that memo. Then December 24th, here's what else we got. Same person is sending another memo. Chief of Staff Jeff Zients got POTUS's verbal approval again, right? He's not signing off on anything. On the following decision during a 12/11 decisional meeting with the president and these other people, saying president approved the commutation of the sentences of 37 of 40 individuals on death row to life without the possibility of parole, which is interesting. It's like if he's opposed to the death penalty because he's a Catholic, well, I don't know why he's so pro-abortion, but that's a separate issue. But why wouldn't he also, if the death penalty is wrong, also just commute the sentences of the other three? Like if he's going to be consistent with his policy, he should display it. Anyways, so I guess the death penalty is okay for certain offenses. All right. So anyways, another one comes out and look at this. Now we're getting very close. January 16th, 2025. We got 4 days coming out, man. They pack up, get out. Here is now more decisions on commutations. Rosa says, on January 11th, POTUS met with Jeff, Ed, Bruce, and President. Decided to commute the sentences of those with crack powder sentencing disparities, which is crazy because Joe Biden was the guy who was on the Senate floor talking about punishing crack and cocaine and making the argument that you should have mandatory sentencing. In many ways, Joe Biden's the godfather of the current, 3-strike system and mandatory sentencing and a lot of these things. So then he's going to come out and because his son is a crackhead, now come out and then pardon these people, sentencing disparities who were determined by the DOJ to not have a high likelihood of recidivism. He also decided to commute the sentences of 21 petitioners on home confinement from Rosa. And we got more emails because the clock has not run out yet. Then, on January 19th, 2025, it says, "Hi, Steph and Fiona. On January 19th, okay, clock is ticking. POTUS met with Ed, Bruce, Steve, Annie, and Anthony, and the president decided the following clemency actions." And they're doing a good job papering the records. Like, Joe decided all of this. The president decided to grant a pardon to this guy, Ernest. And the president decided to rescind his approval for Don. I don't know what Don did. Now, the president decided to grant, look at this, preemptive pardons to the following individuals: James Biden, Sarah Jones Biden, Valerie Biden Owens, John T. Owens, Francis W. Biden, going all the way back to 2014. A criminal family. Joe Biden said he was never going to do that or pardon Hunter. He pardoned his whole friggin' family. In addition to the president's decision to grant preemptive, right? They say this constantly. Joe Biden decided it. I'm sure he did. To grant preemptive pardons to the members of Congress and the January 6th Select Committee. Okay, they're all a part of this decision. So this decision and this meeting is critical. Now we want to know, okay, on January 19th, so who was actually in that meeting? Who was there? And they then approved it. The president decided on January 19th to grant also to the following individual pardons: the Metro Police and the Capitol Police officers who testified before the J6 committee. And then we get a little bit more. Now, this is a curious one. We're going to have to read this one sideways, which is no problem. It says, "All notes taken by staffers in meeting with the president regarding pardons, commutations, or clemency." Note 3. "We searched the meeting notes of all individuals that you mentioned in that list as likely having met with the president to discuss the pardons, commutations, or clemency." Now, they say we searched both the electronic and textual records. And on the textual side, we searched the textual boxes for all the named people and also reviewed the relevant late processed boxes or boxes that were not scanned by ORM. We did not find specific meeting notes that clearly mention or note that the president was present. Woo! I probably should have just clicked this button right here because that would have made it a lot easier. We did not find specific meeting notes that clearly mention or note that the president was present. He wasn't there at the meetings. Oh, well, that's curious. So now we're going to continue on. And the National Archive says Joe was there. Where? We haven't seen anything. Here is more. Here's a memo for the president. This one came out, says the president has seen this, put a stamp on it. Like we shoved it in his face for 2 seconds. December 13th, 2024, they have this other memo. Comes from Ken LeBolt. They've lost the election. And they're trying to now pardon everybody as quickly as they possibly can. So this comes from Ben LeBolt, senior advisor, and it comes from Karine, historic press secretary, you can't forget her, saying the subject, coverage roundup of your clemency actions. They say, hey, Joe, your communications and press team compiled a report of the media coverage on your historic action to pardon your corrupt family to over 1,500 Americans, the most ever on a single day. You did it, Joe, which is crazy because he did like 1980, whatever. I forget all the actual years, like 1984, 1986, 1988, or a bunch of them. Your announcement generated significant positive press coverage. And they go, look at all this, your social media. They give us a full report. Biden selects record number for clemency. Look at this, Joe. Congratulations. USA Today. Hospitals give mothers meds. And more. And then we get to section F, another memo. This one comes out December 10th. It says from Ed Siskel, memo for Joe Biden, White House counsel, says, we recommend you, Joe Biden, use your clemency authority to commute to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole the sentences of the 37 people the current attorney general would not authorize for death. Currently, 40 people are under investigation. Your staff has received significant outreach from the NAACP, ACLU, the Catholic bishops, and even the Pope. Yeah, Catholics are very opposed to the death penalty. Even under today's charging practices, 3 of the 40 individuals would still qualify for a death sentence because they committed mass casualty, hate crimes, or terrorism. You could commute the sentences of the other 37 individuals to life imprisonment without parole. And so this is an interesting little tidbit here, because what we're seeing from the document here is this looks like it's the National Archives that came in and said, all right, look, we actually looked at those meetings. Okay. Like they put them in the meetings. They said, we met on January 19th. All these people, Ed, Bruce, Steve, Annie, Anthony, they're all writing notes, all public records, all in their emails, all forming this up. Is there any paperwork to support that? Or is it just this email? Is it just Rosa is sending an email? And that's like that's the chain of custody. That's the record. National Archives says we haven't found anything else other than this. They just papered the file. Okay. And every lawyer knows what we're talking about. Make sure you paper the file. You got a mad client or something. Make sure, everything's by the book. So they're doing that right here as they're skidding all these pardons through. They say all notes taken by staffers in meetings with the president about all these. We searched the meeting notes of all individuals. We searched everything, electronic and textual records, text boxes, reviewed the relevant late process boxes, even boxes that were not scanned. We did not find specific meeting notes that clearly mention or note the president was present. Incredible. So happy to see that. And now you can see that Just the News is explaining more, saying they uncovered an early memo that shows on day 1, they said original hand signatures, but then by the end, it was verbal signatures. And there's even evidence that he wasn't at the meeting. Records show it was disseminated to everybody. Joe Biden said in June 2025, we remember this statement, I made the decisions about the pardons. Any suggestion that I didn't is ridiculous. And I think this is probably just the beginning of a bunch of additional records that will come out on this, saying despite retroactive emails detailing Biden's presence at the meeting, the National Archives has no contemporaneous staff notes for any meeting attendees that could confirm the president was even there or even gave verbal approval to those clemency acts. So it's just an email from Rosa. Like we're all asking, what is the chain of custody for the decision-making and the authoritative power? Did it even go through Joe? There's really no evidence of that other than Rosa's email. So hopefully Rosa is also going to get a little message from James Comer, because other people are coming in to testify today. Here was this dude walking in, not saying anything.
The cooperation committee, do you want to say anything about, how Biden's doing currently right now after his decision?
What do you plan to tell the committee?
Are you concerned that anyone could be criminally charged?
Doesn't want to say much, but it's happening today, and James Comer is going to fill us in on it because he's also calling out this bombshell memo. He says, a new memo shows that the White House counsel undermined his claims that he personally approved the pardons. The memo shows that in his final year, Biden was increasingly deferring to Kamala and not using his own judgment or presidential power, which is a problem. Now, Joe also may have had a fall. Some people are saying it's a cancer removal, but he also just had a big gash on his head, right? Some people saying that's skin cancer removal. Some people saying maybe that's just stitches because he cracked his head open or something. But doctors can be the judge of that. But here's what the president is up to right now. So he's got skin cancer, prostate cancer, early onset dementia, and all of the things. And he was just in charge of the entire country because the Democrats were lying to us about his capabilities. But Comer was out today, earlier in the week, and he said this when he was having a conversation about the status of this investigation into the corrupt Bidens.
And can you give us a status check on where you are in this investigation?
Yeah, well, these are the last 3 that we have scheduled transcribed interviews for. We may expand it, but thus far we're going to have interviewed close to a dozen former Biden staffers, high-level staffers. I mean, these are from chiefs of staff, the White House spokespeople, and what we're trying to determine is whether or not Joe Biden had any idea who was using that Autopen. and what was being signed with his name on that Autopen. And thus far, Maria, we haven't gotten a lot of evidence that would suggest he had any clue as to what was going on. And the reason this investigation is important is because all of these pardons, the thousands of pardons that were signed with the Autopen, as well as the legal documents like the executive orders that were signed with the Autopen, these are all in question now. And I think that this investigation will go a long way in determining whether or not President Trump and the courts can declare all of those pardons and executive orders null and void.
So do you have a sense of what was going on in the Joe Biden White House?
Man, that would be an epic reversal. Liz Cheney, Adam Schiff, they're all just sleeping in their beds, nestled all cozy right next to their pardons. And then we learn they're invalid, and you just rip them away from Liz. Oh, gosh, I can't wait.
While he was seeing his memory decline and his overall health decline, is that what you have taken away from this?
Yes, and we had the doctor in, Dr. O'Connor. We asked him a simple question: were you ever told to lie about President Joe Biden's health? And he pled the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
I mean, he couldn't even answer that question. So we brought in a lot of
Public
people
servant
that we know used the Autopen. They were the ones who physically put the documents and hit the power button to sign Joe Biden's name. And they never saw Joe Biden. The president never said, here, sign my name on this Autopen or whatever. So we're trying to find who that person was that started this chain of events that resulted in documents being signed with the Autopen. We had Ian Sams, who was a huge critic of me during the Biden investigation, who was a huge critic of the Her Report, who would go on TV constantly and say he spoke with Joe Biden and Joe Biden's at the top of his game. He said under oath he only spoke, physically met with Joe Biden, looked him in the eye, spoke to Joe Biden 2 times over a 2-year period. But yet he would go out almost on a daily basis and imply to the world that, yeah, I've been with President Biden and he's at the top of his game. So there was clearly a cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. What we're trying to get down to is the specific instances when Joe Biden's signature was used on the Autopen. And just last week, Maria, there was a letter that surfaced from the Department of Justice, from the Merrick Garland Department of Justice to the White House saying, look, you can't use that Autopen on legal documents. So they were warned from their own Department of Justice about overusing that Autopen, yet they continued to do it.
Unbelievable.
And got his whole family, Fauci, and some of the most heinous people who deserve justice, pardoned using the pen. So we're happy to see that the Oversight Committee is digging into it, and it feels like this might be the start of something big. Like, they're going to just continue. They're doing these searches. They're assembling the chain, and it shows. Joe Biden was probably not even in those meetings, as we all know. So we'll see if there's any other evidence to respond to that. Otherwise, it sounds like their chain of custody, their papering the file is Rosa Poe. So it'll be interesting to start with her. She's probably just sending the memos out. And so we'll see if these people all get Anthony Bernal, probably, right? Jill's work husband. We'll see what they were really up to. Happy to see progress on this. And we'll keep our eye on this, my friends. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do. All right, let's carry on. Because we've got some more fun stuff to get into. Lisa Cook continues to struggle, now getting responded to by the DOJ in a very appropriate manner. We know that Lisa Cook has a difficult time understanding complicated documents. So the DOJ said, here you go, Lisa. We'll just put it into bullet points for you so you can read it, and Abby Lowell can help you understand it. So here is the case, of course, Lisa Cook versus Donald Trump. She says, I am entitled to my job. You can't fire me. Who do you think you are, the president? And Trump said, yeah, I am the president. I can fire you for cause because of mortgage fraud. And it creates at least the appearance of impropriety because you got 3 houses in a very short time period where you're clearly not signing them as primary residences. So she sued, and now we're in the District of Columbia. And this, of course, is Judge Gia Cobb, who has this case, which is the nice little sorority sister for Lisa Cook, where they swear oaths and pledge to each other, to each for the rest of their lives. And so we'll see what happens. I'm sure she will not recuse herself, even though she should. So what is in this filing is Trump and the DOJ's response back over to her, saying, we clearly have cause to fire you. You're not that bright. Let's explain it. Saying, all right, look, although Dr. Cook, they say, has now filed an additional 30 pages of briefing, she still remains unable to overcome multiple independent legal obstacles to the relief that she seeks and requests. Here's what they are in bullet points. Hopefully she can remember these. Dr. Cook fails to grapple with a century-old precedent that came from the Supreme Court. It's called removal for cause, and it happens as a matter of discretion of the president, and it is not reviewable. That's a 1901 Supreme Court case called Reagan versus the United States. Now, Cook tries to distract on this by citing different parts of the decision, but the court was clear. Substantive review of the president's for cause is wholly foreclosed. Otherwise, you're the president. Even if the president's finding of cause were reviewable, so they say, well, even like it's not, but even if it was, Dr. Cook still offers no tenable theory, has not even explained at all why apparent mortgage fraud does not qualify. She can urge that result only by reading into the statute words that Congress omitted using elsewhere, by pressing invented categorical rules that her counsel had already conceded away. And these categorical rules, remember, they came out, they're like, well, you can only fire her if she's been convicted of a felony involving financial fraud. Like, what? That's not what for cause means. You can only remove her if she murders a whole school bus. What? That's not cause. It's appearance of impropriety. She runs the Federal Reserve. We need it to not commit, have mortgage fraudsters on the board. Turning to procedure, Dr. Cook insists she was entitled to notice and an opportunity to be heard. Her due process claims, which she'll get as soon as she's indicted. No court has ever granted those protections to principal officers. Like, you need a trial before we remove you. Are you kidding? And regardless, is still unable to explain what further notice she would have wanted. She was notified appropriately on True Social with the rest of us. And what she would have wanted, or what she would have even told the president at a hearing. Would she have said, well, it's a clerical error. Sorry, Mr. President, I'm sorry. Here's my defense of your allegation. She hasn't even mentioned it. Now, all else aside, Dr. Cook continues to completely ignore the Supreme Court's twice repeated holding in disputes over whether federal officers have been validly removed. The balance of the equities favors the government, and it does not support her reinstatement because Trump was able to fire Boyle. Trump was able to fire Wilcox. Trump was able to fire Dellinger and many others. The bottom line is that the statute, Lisa, provides for the president to remove for cause. That's what it says. The president exercised that authority after public revelations of mortgage misconduct. And there is no basis in the statute, the Constitution, or the principles of equity for some district court judge sorority sister Gia Cobb to second guess that determination, let alone to order reinstatement. Now, at a minimum, Dr. Cook has not made a strong showing necessary to secure the extraordinary relief, which is putting a fired individual back into their position of power. Now, most of the arguments, writes Trump's DOJ, in Dr. Cook's reply brief were already rebutted. We've already dealt with this, but she just keeps crying about it with Abby. The president files this supplemental authority to address the new points and to cite some additional authority. Now, on the merits, Dr. Cook faces two insurmountable hurdles to her claim that the president lacked cause to remove her. Okay, one, Supreme Court has already held. There is no judicial review for these things. You don't get to substitute your judgment for the president's when the statute clearly gives the president the discretion to make that decision. And second, the president had abundant cause for his action under any standard, no matter what it was, especially after accounting for deference and constitutional avoidance. And here's the case. It's called Reagan versus United States. It held that removals for cause that do not specify the causes that suffice are not subject for judicial review. If they said you can only remove for these causes or for causes like the following, something, then you can consider those criteria. They didn't. That means cause, whatever it happens to be, is up to the discretion of the person who holds that power. A removal for cause, when causes are not defined, is a matter of discretion and it's not reviewable. And that rule squarely applies here, which she is trying to challenge. Now, Dr. Cook also fails to distinguish Reagan and to show why that case is bad. She says the provision in Reagan was really about for causes that are prescribed by law rather than just for cause. But actually, the act just says the Federal Reserve Act, which is illegal, merely provides for removal for cause. Okay, it doesn't say for causes prescribed by law. And this happens all the time in the law. It's really sneaky. They just shove a couple words in there. But that cuts the other way. If the statute permits removal for causes prescribed by law, if it leaves the cause determination to the discretion of the appointing officer, the same goes for other statutes. Now, Dr. Cook is also basically saying it's a distinction without much of a difference. Dr. Cook is also wrong to assert that Reagan and its non-reviewability holding, saying judges can't check these things, is only for offices without fixed terms, okay? So you can't fire the FBI director. Give me a break. You can't fire the Federal Reserve Board. Give me a break. They're all under the executive branch. And the president has the constitutional authority to do it. Now, in rejecting the petitioner's substantive challenge to his removal, the court in Reagan rested solely on the removal for cause. They said the law doesn't define it, and it has nothing to do with a fixed term. The precedent doesn't talk about a fixed term. It talks about cause. Not cause unless you have a fixed term. Dr. Cook blurs the rationale for rejecting the substantive challenge with something the court said in rejecting a procedural challenge. Now, as to the latter, the court reasoned that notice and hearing are only required where causes of removal are specified by constitution or statute. Otherwise, it's cause. Now, the dictum about procedural protections for officers with fixed terms, that's also, again, because just think about it logically. Like if somebody comes in, she says it's mortgage fraud, it's not a big deal. I think it is because she's on the board of the governors of the Federal Reserve. So it's pretty important for her to have financial propriety and not even a smidgen of an appearance of impropriety in that position. And that is cause. Now, her contrary theory also makes no sense. There is no reason to think that Trump's discretionary determination of what constitutes cause is any more amenable to judicial review, simply because she's got a fixed term. And again, this is mortgage fraud, but what happens if she embezzled $1 billion? And you'd say, well, that's definitely for cause. Because they're saying that this is not for cause, right? And it's not their decision to make that. Well, this is more serious than that. It's not their decision. Trump can make that decision. If they don't like it, they can impeach him or pass a statute. Congress doesn't have to sit there. They can pass a statute or do something about it. But just think about it. If she embezzles $1 billion and you can't fire her, it's like, what? That doesn't make any logical sense. Or you can only fire her after the 14 years are up. Or you can only fire her after she's had notice and a hearing and all of these other things. And so the Federal Reserve has to have this allegedly corrupt individual on the board wrecking the sanctity of that body. And why would the executive branch want to have that go on for 6 months, a year, while she goes through her appeals and all those things? You get fired, you go file your complaint for damages in another government jurisdiction and make your claim there for money, but you're not entitled to this position. They say this is also a non sequitur. The DC Circuit has confirmed as much by holding a fixed term of office is a ceiling. It's not a floor on the length of the service. And so a fixed term doesn't give you any removal protections. It's already been decided, 1897. And also, they explained why Marbury versus Madison, the seminal case that establishes judicial review, is not holding differently. Now, other cases actually corroborate Reagan. President Cleveland removed the justice of the peace under a statute authorizing removal for cause. The DC Supreme Court said, you can't review that. You can't determine the sufficiency of the causes. You're not the president. You don't get to say that's good enough. Okay. Likewise, the Supreme Court of Colorado said the same thing. New Jersey said the same thing. And even treatises, a treatise here that was written in 1892 from Montgomery Throp, he said the same. So Dr. Cook instead she points to nothing that calls this long-established doctrine into question. And indeed, she ignores entirely that modern Supreme Court precedent has further shielded the president's discretionary determinations. Dalton versus Specter. President can fire people. Instead, Dr. Cook says, judicial review must be available. Otherwise, Congress and their restrictions are dead letter. But that doesn't follow. As these other cases illustrate, not every vague standard that the legislature imposes is subject to enforcement by the judiciary. And finally, Dr. Cook also cites legislative history, which is usually a pretty bad strategy. She says, well, Congress contemplated that members of the board would be independent. Now, justices, of course, are not subject to removal by the president, right? For cause or otherwise. And that's a check. The executive can't remove the judges, only Congress, which is why we were screaming about this yesterday. They are only removable through impeachment. Had Congress wanted the governors of the Federal Reserve to be equally protected, just like judges, they would have said so, but they didn't. Now, even if it were reviewable, there's no basis to disturb Trump's decision. To repeat here, what happened? Let's be clear, it's fraud. A senior financial regulator made flatly inconsistent representations in important financial documents shortly before taking office, so she could go gobble up a bunch of properties before the scrutiny came upon her. Okay, it was a corrupt process. In addition to being fraudulent, just on the sake of getting a lower mortgage rate. Like that is obviously a problem. But in addition, she was buying all these things up, knowing she's going to this board. Treating that as cause for removal is hardly a clear-cut abuse of discretion, warranting judicial intervention. And it does not somehow mean that the president has more power to remove other Federal Reserve members than other agencies. It's the same. Removal restrictions applicable to the latter officials are unconstitutional, meaning Article 2 empowers the president to remove them at will. You can't limit the presidential power. And so this court doesn't need to wade in to, is the Federal Reserve exempt from that rule? We don't have to go into, like, we would like this to escalate, to be honest with you. I'd like Jerome to be fired. I'd like this go to the Supreme Court and have them say the Federal Reserve Act, which created a pseudo-independent body outside of our three branches, is unconstitutional. I'd like to see that. But we don't have to get there, is what they're saying. Because the law says it's for cause, and we can just get rid of them for cause. Now, this court doesn't even need to go into it. Now, Dr. Cook, again, she says, well, for cause means only inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance. Again, we think that committing mortgage fraud and continuing to profit from that fraudulent and corrupt contract is a perpetuation of the crime. That is malfeasance in office. So, Lisa, even according to your own standards, you passed the test. But she is quickly forced to concede the Supreme Court rejected that reading previously. And so her second escape hatch, she's struggling, is that conduct before taking office could not amount to cause because she did it before she came in. So the fact that she committed all of her frauds in anticipation of getting the job immunizes her. As long as you get in, you're good. Notably, her counsel affirmatively abandoned that claim at the hearing. Abby said, well, we're not taking that absolute position. That concession was prudent. For one thing, nothing in the text even hints that cause is limited to conduct in office. Now, malfeasance in office that they made up says that, but that's not what the law says. And for another, there is no principled basis to maintain that pre-office misconduct can serve as grounds to be impeached, but not presidential removal for cause. That doesn't make any sense. So you could remove a judge for this? You could impeach a judge? For a third, even the state court cases that she cites, they recognize that pre-office conduct can be cause for removal. Because if it is rendering that person unfit to serve, they can't be there. That's exactly what President Trump did. And there is no second basis for a court to second guess it. And relatedly, Dr. Cook, she also distorts our response to a hypothetical at last week's hearing. She says that her mortgage misconduct was not a valid cause because it was already long known to the government. They already had these records and they didn't do anything. Now, she did not make that claim in her complaint or her opening motion, And so it's therefore forfeited, but regardless, it is also wrong, right? She can't just shove new arguments in here. Now, while obscured by squirrely language, Dr. Cook does not say she ever provided the underlying mortgage documents to the White House or to the Senate. She says that only she identified both properties as subject to mortgage loans on her Form 278E and described one as her primary residence and another as a second home. But none of that is problematic. And like anyone else, she's free to seek a second mortgage on her home. But like anyone else, she could not misrepresent it as a second residence. And so she's not proving in any of her evidence here that the Senate was aware of her misconduct and confirmed her nonetheless. They didn't know about the misconduct. Like she's like, well, I submitted the paperwork to you and you didn't catch me. I cheated on the test and I got it through. So you can't hold that against me because you're too dumb to catch my cheating. It doesn't make any legal difference. What are you talking about? Finally, Dr. Cook's pretext theory is also legally foreclosed and factually unsupported. She's saying Trump is specifically targeting me. Now, as to the facts, any idea that this is a pretext is baseless. Her only evidence is that the president has criticized the board over their policy. But the mere existence of a policy disagreement doesn't override any for-cause removals. You can have both. You can have a disagreement and for-cause removal. Just because it's like, you can only remove people you agree with? Is that the rule? No. None of the president's statements about Federal Reserve policy made any mention of removing her. Indeed, the president can have disagreements and he can make those known. It doesn't immunize her from consequences of misconduct because the president disagrees with her agency. Now, her procedural challenge is also futile, just like the Borg. Dr. Cook's fallback procedural challenge is no better. There's no statutory right to a notice or hearing. Stop crying about due process. First of all, the Federal Reserve Act did not confer on her a right to notice in a hearing before removal. She's not on trial. The Act provides no procedures requiring notice. It doesn't contain any processes in the Act either. It says for cause. That's it. Not for cause, but you have to let him stay here in this position for 6 months while they flesh out their complaint. That stands in stark contrast to other statutes that expressly require notice and a hearing before a removal. For example, the National Labor Relations Board, they put in their statute upon notice and a hearing. And so Congress knows how to write words, So if they want to put it in there, they could do that. But Congress didn't. Congress has shown it knows how to adopt language. We have to presume that they're intelligent. They know how to write things. So I know it's a stretch, but courts have to believe that. Indeed, Congress demonstrated that they understood the bill. The original bill passed, and there was a debate about it. And the law is what it says. Now, Dr. Cook argues that the critical cases supporting her arguments are these two cases, but those cases are bad. Simply put, the key question, does the statute, does the law, does it give her a right to a notice and hearing? No, it doesn't. The answer is it is not a requirement. They didn't have to give her anything. She got plenty of notice on the True Social post like the rest of us. Now, her alternative theory is that she has a property interest. It's her position, which is obviously insane and anti-American. Dr. Cook discounts Taylor. And Taylor has already said, public office is not property. It doesn't belong to you. You're not entitled to titles of nobility or whatever for the rest of your life, and all your further generations get to inherit your position in the Federal Reserve. Get out of here. She discounts Taylor because she says, well, that was about elected offices, but that's not how the court reasoned on any of this. One of the reference decisions was which rejected a property right. She tries to distinguish, but she mischaracterizes the case. The Supreme Court's understanding is consistent, with the traditional view of state courts that offices in this country is not property. There is no vested right. It's wholly inconsistent with our system of government. We don't have indefinite kings. So then she points to Marbury versus Madison, and she says, well, there is judicial review, but she cites no case holding that any public officer, let alone, has a property interest that is subject to judicial review. It's not what it's for. It is impossible to conceive how, under our form of government, somebody could own a title to a government office. It's insane. It's not England. In any case, the procedures utilized here were sufficient to satisfy any materials. She says, I didn't get notice. But there is no real question that actual notice satisfies her rights. And she says, well, there were no specifics ever provided. She says, I didn't know why I'm getting fired. She says she identifies no facts that were unclear. Well, what didn't you understand? We said you got fired for mortgage fraud. What was so confusing to you? The referral attached the agreements and their contradicting covenants, and they speak for themselves. The only missing fact is whether Dr. Cook acted intentionally or negligently. And that doesn't matter to for cause. Because either way, it's bad. Like, oh, you're just an idiot? You can't fill out mortgage documents? So how can we trust you to look at complicated financial documents that relate to the safety of the country? We can't. So you're fired for cause. Now, on opportunity to be heard, she says that the president didn't invite her to push back on the charges. And the president's not obligated to do that. She says this lawsuit is not the place to make her case and more. But the factors here support denying Cook's motion. Last week's opposition brief explained that the orders in Wilcox and Boyle are binding precedent on the application. In both cases, they said that the government faces a risk of harm by having people shoved back in when the government doesn't want them there. That holding is binding, and it should apply here. And Dr. Cook doesn't distinguish it at all. All she wants you to do is just ignore those cases. Now, indeed, she cites Wilcox for a caveat where they actually did mention the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve, they were only responding to an argument from somebody who was not in the Federal Reserve that there were greater protections for other agencies, saying, this is not crazy. Look, the Federal Reserve has protections. Look, over here has. So the Supreme Court was responding to that, saying, well, yeah, the Federal Reserve protections are different than you. They're distinguishing this person, Wilcox, from whatever position he was in. But that doesn't mean that the Supreme Court ruled on the Federal Reserve in that case. It wasn't even the subject of the case. So that question is not presented here. And it's very similar to the balance of the harms. The harms of allowing an officer removed for cause to be shoved back in creates more harm. Now, even looking at her irreparable harm, she said she also has reputational stigma for her. Yeah, mortgage fraud is not really that much of a reputational stigma. Instead, it's the fact that you got fired for it. Even looking at Dr. Cook's irreparable harm, her demand fails under the law. She tries to distinguish her situation by saying her removal, there it is, involves reputational and stigmatic harm. So she's unique and special. So she gets all of the protections against that. Anybody who gets fired has to deal with that. But those harms are attributable to the new revelations of her misconduct. It's not unfair, not for her for-cause removal. Reinstatement would not erase the revelations and restore her reputation, and nor should it. The damage is done when she adamantly refuses to address the charges in any way. She could have responded, I didn't sign it. In any event, the law does not support a reputational exception. The only cases that she cites address the framework for at-will employees when they can bring due process challenges, but she's not being deprived of anything. Even assuming she was entitled to more process she received, it doesn't change the nature of the harm she's suffering. It's loss of employment, and that is not irreparable. Everybody, you can lose your jobs all the time. It doesn't mean you get to go sue somebody and say, you've caused me irreparable damage. You're fired. Society couldn't function if that was the standard. There is no other concrete harm that she is alleging. All of these are facially wrong. And so, indeed, if anything, an injunction reinstating Cook to office is even less warranted on her procedural claim. There's no basis for her having an opportunity to be heard or any of those things. And so, if the court, you, Judge Gia Cobb, sorority sister, if you have any doubts about the merits of this, you should deny this injunction based on the equities alone. In other words, you don't even have to reach like for cause or the constitutionality of the Federal Reserve. She's a fraudster and a mortgage fraudster, so it satisfies those things for sure. But in addition to that, just the act alone of putting somebody who was fired back into the position tilts the balance of equities in favor of the government. Just that fact. Doesn't matter what agency it is, doesn't matter what a Supreme Court has said. Your remedy is you don't go back into the position of power. You go file your claim elsewhere and deal with it there. So they say the court should deny the requested relief, in a very nice filing here from Jeremy S.B. Newman over at the DOJ, U.S. Department of Justice Civil Division. Very nice filing, and I think Lisa is cooked. So we'll see what she says. She wants a surreply, and the DOJ is objecting to this. But she says here, she submitted another motion, Abby Lowell, we want to file a surreply. So we can respond to that, and we'll see if they do. But we've also got some conversation about this, and this is a great exchange and interview. This guy's name is, as we're going to find out, James Fishback. He runs a hedge fund, I believe, an investment fund, portfolio, some kind of a fund, and is a sharp dude who's been on this saying what Lisa Cook is doing is having an impact on the financial sector. I'm in the financial sector. I know, I can see it. And he's explaining how bad it is on with these Fox people. And also, Fishback also submitted an amicus brief. Okay, so he's actually involved in the litigation as well.
Bailing people out when the shinola hits the fan.
That is exactly right, Dagan. There is not a problem the Federal Reserve has actually preemptively, proactively solved in the American economy.
What do?
They caused the housing bubble. They missed the boat on Wells Fargo. They fell asleep at the wheel on Silicon Valley Bank. Now Lisa Cook, who's been credibly accused of mortgage.
And they always tell us the Federal Reserve is going to bring stability to the American economy. And you got, well, how did 2007 and 8 happen? Like, how did all these things happen? Why do we have these economic booms and busts? Well, it's because the Federal Reserve is manipulating those. And then they also say, well, the Federal Reserve is going to stop runs on the banks. You go, okay, did that stop at all? Ever? No, we have banks, there are runs on the banks. We had that to print more money to prop up the banks. So it's like, what is that all about? They're supposed to create safety and stability. And the other argument we hear a lot is the Federal Reserve is going to stop inflation. There's not going to be any more inflation because they're going to have sound fiscal and monetary policy. What are they talking about? They printed more money than ever in these last years.
Mortgage fraud wants us all to believe she can stay in a seat, Dagan, to stop mortgage fraud. Bill Pulte has said this time and again. This type of mortgage fraud undermines mortgage origination. We call it at Azoria the Lisa Cook tax. We did the math on this, Dagan. Because of the owner occupancy fraud that Lisa Cook committed, if you were to eliminate all of that in the entire housing market, you would actually lower mortgage rates by 14 basis points. That might not sound like a lot, but that's $17,000 over the life of a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So to your point, I think the Federal Reserve gets far too much credit on the way up and far too little accountability on the way down. I wish we could stop talking about it, but I'm glad that the president has removed her. And make no mistake, she is fired. Larry is right.
Well, she's still sitting there, and I'm kind of waiting to see if...
And that's the question. Why is Jerome allowing that to happen? Maybe he should be fired too, and we can just duke this whole thing out right now and ask ourselves, why do we have the Federal Reserve? And what have they achieved for us by having this so-called independence outside and apart from the executive branch? And you might like that. You may not want the president to have control over fiscal and monetary policy or have any say-so in that. But isn't that important to our own self-governance? It's weird how we have like sort of democratic representation in many other areas of our governance, except fiscal and monetary policy. And however the American people want to vote, Trump comes in, he has a whole different vision for economic policy, monetary policy, fiscal responsibility. Shouldn't we have some accountability for those decisions so that the president can make some decisions and we can say, that was a bad idea. Holy crap. We might be going through that right now. We might fast forward 4 years and go, wow, tariffs, that was an interesting little experiment. But maybe it didn't work out. Or maybe it does, right? Maybe it works out beautifully well and we have a much more prosperous and less hollowed out country. But we would like to have some accountability, some skin in the game for those decisions, not just delegate all of this stuff out to some third party, fourth party who's not even a lawful entity of our country and who enables mortgage fraudsters who cause all of our mortgages to go up. We got to pay more money because she's getting benefits. We're happy to see some accountability happening here, and we'll keep our eye on this one. All right, let's carry on because we've got some more good stuff. A disgraceful web of lies now exposed involving this fella, Charles McGonigal. And we're going to go through some of this web here and connect the dots because it's now more relevant than ever after this new Office of the Inspector General report came back down. Published September 25, an investigation into alleged misconduct by former FBI special agent in charge, high up there, Charles McGonigal. And we know who this guy was. And here, this little chart came out from our friends at Oversight Project. They said this guy, just for some context before we read into the report, they say since 2023, we've highlighted many troubling connections between the CCP influence, CEFC, these oil companies, and FBI agent McGonigal. We're going to read through the report. It's damning. This dude was bad, and he got away with a bunch of stuff because the FBI is corrupt, and so is the DOJ. But the obfuscation of this glaring failure by the Biden DOJ will stain the history of the government's anti-CCP efforts. And look who is here as part of this entire scandal. Hunty Biden. And what was he? He was a JV partner over there. Look at his signatures right there on some of those documents. Robert Hunter Biden. Wow. He was working with Patrick Ho as a JV partner of CEFC, an energy conglomerate from China. And he got $6 million that went over to the Biden family because he was working with them as a consultant, okay, selling access to his daddy. Now, Patrick Ho was an affiliate with the company. Dorian Duca was a CEFC employee working for China. And Charles McGonigal, as we're going to see, was an FBI agent who had undisclosed meetings with these people and tipped off everybody about the investigation, okay, obstructed the investigation. He was not charged for that, but he should have been. Here you can see CCP sending a bunch of stuff over to the CEFC. It's kind of, state company. And Hunty was getting rich and fat off of it. And so now the report comes out and tells us a lot more about Charles McGonigal. You know how these things go. They have to investigate themselves. It takes like a decade. And then finally we get some answers on it. But this is a detailed report. And we want to hit the highlights on it because there's a bunch of factual background in here. And so we'll fast forward through a lot of this and just get to the analysis and the findings, which will explain the bad facts for us. But there was a lot of meetings, okay? And they're showing you they did some background on the CEFC investigation, his relationship with Person B, his leaks of sensitive, non-public information about the investigation back over to the Chinese, and more. Big problems here. So let's hit the doc and get into it. It says, this report is now describing the criminal investigation of McGonigal. And he was at the FBI, special agent in charge of counterintelligence, okay, for the FBI's New York field office. He was there October 2016 until he retired in 2018. Then in January 23, DOJ actually indicted him. The case was prosecuted again by the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. They charged him with concealing that he got $225,000 in cash from an Albanian national with ties to the Albanian government. Now, Person A say all of this happened while he was the special agent in charge and committed false reporting on various foreign travel and foreign contacts, okay? FBI agent, special agent in charge. The indictment further charged McGonigal with failing to disclose the meetings while serving as a special agent in charge with Person A and Person B, who was also an employee of the Chinese energy company. So he pled guilty in district court, and that's it. Now, in the other indictment on that one, he pled guilty. This one came out of the Southern District of New York. It said that McGonigal and an alleged co-conspirator were charged with violating the International Economic Powers Act, money laundering, conspiring to commit money laundering, and more. From Oleg Duripska, a Russian oligarch, he wanted to get more money from her after he retired. So he was just setting himself up. Now, the investigation determined that prior to his retirement, he began building a relationship with that person's agent, wanted to do business with her after this time at the FBI. Then he pled guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. And let's see how much time he served. 50 months of incarceration. and then 28 months to be served after serving the 58 months, so 50 plus 28. The report describes the administrative investigation here and gives us some more details. And so let's jump into it. So they give us a methodology, and the summary of the findings are here. Saying the OIG uses the preponderance of the evidence standard. It's like 51%. If it's more likely than not the person did the thing, you met it. Now, as described in this report, we determined that he engaged in a scheme that obstructed important multi-year investigations under his supervision and compromised the integrity of the FBI. Specifically, evidence demonstrates that for his personal gain, he cultivated a secret, ongoing personal business relationship with Person B, all interfacing with the Chinese. Now, the impact of this investigation and his leaks was substantial. Person B shared the information with at least 2 investigative targets, okay? FBI's looking into Ho and the China chairman. FBI agent who's supposed to be investigating them, works for counterintelligence, tips them off, which led the chairman to warn Ho and Target 3 that the U.S. authorities were going to arrest Ho and 2 other Chinese nationals and possibly a Jewish person associated with the CEFC, which Target 3 believed was potentially a reference to him. So based on the events and the evidence, we conclude that the chairman's warning played at least some role in Target's 3 decision not to return back to the United States. He did not return. The FBI did not get a search warrant for him, and they missed the opportunity to gather significant evidence. And Hunter is the beneficiary of all of this. Now, as described in this report, maybe he was the subject too, Ho also debated whether to come back to the United States. He ultimately did return and he was arrested. I think we covered that. Although Ho was arrested, the leaked information from McGonigal gave Ho a warning and an opportunity to assess all of this. And he said it's safe to come back, actually. He's like, no, we got you covered. Come on back. And he got busted. Now, in addition, the evidence demonstrates that McGonigal impeded the investigation. He failed to inform the FBI case team about his ongoing contacts. He's a mole. Redacted, redacted, redacted. He's got a lot of responsibility in investigating these things, and they're going to give us details on it, but they say that this FBI agent, a special agent in charge, engaged in disgraceful conduct at the expense of a multi-year investigation. Disgraceful indeed. And so there's a lot of facts here. Let's go and fast forward until we get to the findings, because it's a lot of details about the conversations and back and forth. And we're just going to see what they say in a summary of all of it. As you can see, we fast forward through a lot of it. Here is the analysis and the findings after all of those facts and all the details about their investigation. They say, all right, look, based on everything above, we determined that while he was the special agent, he engaged in a scheme and obstructed an important multi-year investigation. In fact, during Person B's proffer, he told the FBI case team, he said that SDNY prosecutors, McGonigal told him that we're looking into them. We are going after them, which Person B said, oh, I know what that means. They're coming after CEFC. Then November 2017, McGonigal also told Person B the FBI was ready for them, ready for action just days before they got search warrants and conducted arrests. Although this information alone would have been more than enough to obstruct or impede this, we conclude that his own admissions and other evidence demonstrate that he actually even gave Person B more information than Person B acknowledged, right? So Person B was holding back. McGonigal was he says, like, I gave them more than even he says. As described earlier in the report, Person B stated during his October 2022 proffer that to the FBI that he met with Ho in person, and that Ho, according to senior officials, the FBI was going after Ho, and they might also be looking at an Israeli person connected to the CEFC. That's interesting. McGonigal also eventually admitted that he told Person B the FBI was going to arrest these people and that Ho would be arrested if returned. And he further admitted, when asked whether the chairman was going to be charged, McGonigal, the FBI agent, said, yeah, there's a chance. Given these admissions, we know that these were leaks, and actually McGonigal gave this person even more details than that person admits. Now, although McGonigal initially claimed during his proffer that he did not recall whether there was a person B meeting with an Israeli person for similar reasons, we believe that evidence establishes that McGonigal, through person B, was the source. FBI agent telling all of these criminals that U.S. authorities had obtained arrest warrants for 4 people involved with the CEC, 2 Chinese nationals, and a 4th person, 2 Chinese nationals, and a 4th person of Jewish or African descent. Now, according to the FBI report documenting person B's proffer, person B did not tell the FBI investigators that McGonigal gave him these specific details. But this information tracked with other complaints, and there's no other likely government source who had access to this. It's him. So although the full extent of the harm of his leaks will likely never fully be known, crazy, we determined that the impact of his conduct was substantial. Indeed, his leak warned them, Ho and the Jewish person, that they were going to be arrested. We concluded that the chairman's warning played at least some role in the target's decision not to return back to the United States, and he warned Ho to be cautious. Now, because Target 3 did not return, FBI couldn't get their search warrant, and they ended up getting an indictment, but evidence indicates we lost a lot of evidence because we didn't get this dude. And finally, McGonigal's failure to inform the FBI and the case team had tangible consequences for the investigation, all redacted. He knew the agents under his supervision were expending time and resources on this, and there's no question that he knew his actions were wrongful and likely to negatively impact the investigation. He was a special agent in charge, he was aware of his obligations, and he didn't. Although he attempted to minimize his motivations as mere bravado, why, like anti-Trump stuff or what? The evidence showed that he wanted to protect person B. He wanted a lucrative business connection after he left the FBI. And the evidence showed that he knew that this dude was paid 50 G's a month by China. An investigation into the chairman would have significant financial impact to person B and would open up questions about what they were doing. And so they analyzed all these laws and say he violated them, FBI policies, applicable laws, and we conclude based on a preponderance of the evidence that McGonigal violated multiple FBI offense codes and policies, engaged in disgraceful conduct that compromised the integrity of the agency, leaked public information, violated FBI codes, and there can be no doubt that his obstructive and deceptive actions compromise the integrity of the FBI. For any FBI employee to leak this stuff is a serious violation of public trust. For a special agent in charge, responsible for overseeing the counterintelligence program, to do this for lucrative business decisions is horrific. Saying, accordingly, we conclude he engaged in disgraceful conduct, violating FBI codes of conduct, and also tried to develop a relationship with foreigners. Now, the standard of ethical conduct also recognizes public trust is important, and he fell below those standards. Now, being motivated by bravado doesn't immunize him. His unauthorized disclosures were knowingly made. He undoubtedly knew the investigations were happening and the arrests were going to be made. And so based on the evidence, disgraceful conduct, and FBI is compromised. And so, yeah, he's being punished. He's going to prison for 78 months, whatever the number was. And then he'll be out. And the question, of course, is, how many other FBI agents who are still there are acting and behaving in this manner? We know that they can't even investigate themselves, which is why this has to go over to the Office of the Inspector General. Because when the FBI opened up 7 different investigations that we covered here, put them all in a mind map and explained, they found no leaks. FBI investigated themselves 7 times. How many leakers did they find? 0. Not 1. Do you know why? Because they were the ones doing it. A lot of this, I think, is tacitly approved in that disgusting agency. And here's what Mahncke had to say. He wrote Swift Boating America. This revelation from the new Inspector General report is staggering. And you're not going to hear about it, a word, from the legacy media. It says McGonigal giving secret information about an ongoing investigation to the very targets of the probe. That's bad enough, but it gets worse when you learn This investigation was into Hunter's Chinese firm and Hunter's business partners. But the worst part is that Joe Biden's DOJ didn't even prosecute him for it. If there was ever a case for recusal, this is it. There needs to be a full and thorough investigation into this and Hunter Biden as well. And so good reporting there from Hans. We know the Oversight Project did a lot of digging on this. And Kash Patel was out today, not talking about that case, but talking about Chinese drugs and Chinese influence in America and how they're paying much closer attention to that now.
There has not been attacked, and that's why the priority at the FBI is national security and violent crime. And this case demonstrates the intersection of those two top mission sets that the FBI has. And we're proud to stand here in Ohio today in the first of its kind effort to lead this takedown, to lead this initiative. And we're relying on you and the media to read these indictments and look at the complexities in which the CCP mainland operations will go through to import these substances to the Mexican drug cartels and put them onto our streets here through local operatives. And unless you unwind that web, and unless you track down every single person and business and entity and flow of money involved in it, you will never break the wheel. We are here today to break the wheel of fentanyl trafficking in the United States of America, and I couldn't be prouder to be here in Ohio to announce this initiative and this wonderful takedown. And again, thanks to our partners here on the ground, the SAC, the United States Attorney, DEA, state and local law enforcement. It's a true honor to be here, and I'll let them give you guys the details. Thank you.
All right, Kash Patel out there hoping to reform the agency, and we'll see if he gets it done. But McGonigal busted. Happy to see the reporting coming out. All it does is really expose more corruption and just, well, why didn't he get prosecuted for all those things? Why didn't the other people get prosecuted? Where did this investigation get cut off before it got to Hunter Biden? We already know Hunter Biden was tipped off by DOJ people before they were going to go search his residence or his storage facility and all the things. And so we'll keep our eye on this one. And of course, hope for more justice for the rest of the people involved in this disgusting web of deceit. All right, now, my friends, one more quick update on E. Jean Carroll, and then we'll hear from you on the day. Here is what's happening in the Supreme Court of the United States. We're back on E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit. You remember her, the lady who said that Trump Bergdorfed her in a dressing room at Bergdorf's. Didn't really remember what year it was or what happened. No witnesses, no cameras, no evidence at all, no receipts, nothing. She just made it up. And remember that in this case, New York law passed a survivor's statute. They extended the statute of limitations to create a new private right of action, literally for her. Her lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, even admitted that during an interview. They changed the laws so that this crazy woman, in my opinion, could come out, make a claim about something that never happened, and then secure a big bag of cash on the back of it. She was supported by all the lefties. We know she went and met with Molly Jong-Fast and George Conway, Dementoid, and many others who were funding this. Reid Hoffman, many of them putting up cash just because they needed an attack on Trump because they don't want Trump to expose them. So all of this has now been percolating. It was lots of money, millions of dollars. And what happened is, now we're at the Supreme Court. President Trump says, all right, SCOTUS, we're now asking for an extension, essentially. We're coming to you. We're not ready yet, but we're coming to you for a petition for a writ of cert. And we're coming in hot, courtesy of James Otis Law Group, Justin Smith in the Supreme Court. And they say, all right, SCOTUS, we're now here. We're asking for a 60-day extension of time. Trump is going to be filing a petition here, appealing from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, at the lower level, when we appealed this, the Court of Appeals entered its judgment on December 30th. They had in a petition for a rehearing en banc. Trump put that in there, and they denied it. Now, the concurrence, the dissent, and the statement accompanying the denial were all reported. And if we don't have this extension of time, we're going to run out of time. So we need you to give us an extension because our deadline is going to be September 11th. So they submitted this. Hopefully the court gives them the extension. Otherwise, they're going to be working hard over the weekend. In 2019, Trump made statements denying false accusations brought against him in a New York Magazine article by E. Jean Carroll, the vagina cat lady, blue painting tree lady. Trump made these statements from the White House in response to the press inquiries about this matter of public interest, which would all be immunized. He can respond to accusations against him and his office. And the White House press distributed his statements. But then she sued. The defamation action she filed in 2019 is known as Carroll 1. The Second Circuit heard oral arguments on all of that. And this application relates to Carroll 2, an action that Carroll brought in 2022 that wrongly alleges battery and defamation. Now, Trump has consistently and unequivocally denied all of this. So Carroll 2 proceeded to trial before Carroll 1. Carroll 1 was delayed because of proceedings about Trump's presidential immunity defense, which he has, and whether the United States could be substituted as a party for the president. And we get some case law there. Remanded says, holding that the president is an employee of the government for the purposes of the Westfall Act, and certifying to the D.C. Court of Appeals the question, did Trump make those statements within his course of employment as the president? Court of Appeals found no error and said Trump loses. Now, as a result of these errors, Carroll got $5 million in an award in Carroll 2. And based on the incorrect findings in Carroll 2, the district court wrongly applied issue preclusion in Carroll 1, okay, saying, now you've already litigated that issue. In that case, it's done, so you can't relitigate that here, even though Carroll 1 happened first, improperly preventing Trump from contesting the merits in that action. So Carroll then obtained an unjust judgment of $83 million in Carroll 1 for the Bergdorf being, for being Bergdorfed and Bergdorfed, even though the jury found that Trump did not do the R, the old hibbity-dibbity, didn't happen. So they found she was not credible, but they gave her a gimme for the old DJ Diddles, era. President Trump intends to seek review by this court of significant issues arising from the Second Circuit's erroneous decision in Carroll 2. And these issues involve, without limitation, disagreements among the circuits, including divergences of authorities under the rules of evidence. And so we need more time, and good cause exists for an extension to prepare for a petition of writ of cert. Undersigned counsel faces significant press of business due to many upcoming deadlines. A brief on the motion for permanent injunctions due. We got a dispositive motion to be held here, and another dispositive motion here, and another dispositive motion here. And so Justin Smith, he's counsel for the president. He's like, hey, man, hey, Supreme Court, like, I got a lot of other stuff going on, so I just need a little bit more time. We'll see if they give it to him. The applicant has not previously requested an extension. They'll probably give it to him, but this case is going up to, I believe it was Sotomayor. So she's, the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor is going to receive this case. And so they also gave us the rest of the record. So it's a very short, notice, basically just asking for more time. But they gave us the rest of the opinions from the lower courts, and we'll see what happens. I think the Supreme Court should grant this. I think that Trump will win this, and he's not going to owe her $1 because he's got immunity. And he was responding to an accusation about him as the president, and he made the statements while being the president. They didn't even consider it. President should be immune from those civil claims. And the defamation claim was, of course, the pretext for the original claim, as we saw. Carroll 2 went before Carroll 1, and then he couldn't talk about what happened in Carroll 1 because of Carroll 2. So we'll keep our eye on this, my friends. Of course, the Supreme Court will issue a ruling on it. We'll see what they do. If they get an extension, that will be delayed. If they don't get an extension, they're going to be typing very quickly this weekend. So we'll keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do. What a beautiful day it has been, my friends. Happy Friday, and thanks for being here. If you're just joining us, quick recap on what we talked about today, and then we'll hear from you. But we started off with this bombshell, Biden bombshell memo, which essentially said he may not have even been in the meetings. The National Archives, they papered the file, they combed through a bunch of records, and they said, there's no evidence Joe Biden was in the meetings at all. They said he was, but nobody took notes. There's no, video, no signatures, nothing, because it probably never happened. We talked about that. James Comer says the investigation's heating up. This dude came in today to testify. Doesn't look like he's going to say much, but we'll see. Then Lisa Cook is still getting cooked, and we had a very nice reply, actually a supplemental brief, come in from the Trump DOJ. And this one even painted this out for the so-called Dr. Lisa Cook in bullet points so that her and her lawyers can just go through the list and hopefully understand something. We then talked about McGonigal, this guy right here, caught in this web of corrupt, arguably treasonous individual who seems like he was only minorly charged for violating his duty to America by cheating with the Chinese and maybe a Jewish person. But Hunter Biden was involved in this, and hopefully this web of lies continues to be fleshed out. We read through the OIG's report, hit the highlights on it that just show what a scumbag this guy actually was. And now he's in prison, not for that long, 78 months. It is a long time, but for this, not that long. Should have been charged with a lot more. Hopefully the investigation continues on. Kash saying he's going to reform the agency. We then talked about what's going on in the E. Jean Carroll case. Now knocking on the door of the Supreme Court saying, we're coming soon. We're going to allege immunity and say Trump doesn't owe her a dime, and we hope the Supreme Court finds accordingly. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you, and thank you for being here. Happy Friday! I hope your week was outstanding and amazing. Thank you for supporting our work here. Thanks for becoming membos. Membos, stick around. We're going to have a members-only after party as soon as we are done in here, and we'll see you over there. But until we get there, let's say hello to some donos in the house. And Carrie B, thank you for clipping for us today on the early morning stream. Let's pop out our YouTube friends and see what's cooking over here and get everything nice and situated and beautified. Here's what we've got, my beautiful friends. Let's see who's here. And donos over on the locals. This one came in from Rick D. Hey, Rick D says, update on Biden's head wound from yesterday. It was not an accident. It was an incision from having what was called skin cancer removed. Yeah, I mean, I think that's plausible, but it's a lot of skin cancer, man. Was that skin cancer there before? Like, that's a lot of skin cancer. Did we see that on there? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But either way, I hope he gets well and is recovering. What's going on, Chubby? Hey, Rob, everyone knows that a Fed governor can only be removed, oh, this is new, when Aquarius is rising in the 10th house for the 8th time in a month. And then it can't even be the president. Only Ming the Merciless can remove them for cause. Duh. 8 U.S. Code Section 2516. It's right there. Abby Lowell. Look it up. Thank you for that, Chubby. Dan, hey, Dan Sundin. But Lisa Cook committed the fraud with her credit unions instead of a bank. So it's all okay. Is that another thesis from her, Dan? Well, I didn't defraud you. I defrauded you. So I guess I'm in the clear. Thank you, Dan. Milo Phone Bill. What's up, Milo? Says Federal Reserve Governor Dr. Cook did not even try the independent branch of government argument. No, she didn't. She didn't. But they kind of try it. They're like, well, it's independence and for cause and this historical, like they say these stupid platitudes, like the historical tradition of the Federal Reserve. Does the law say you can only be fired if you're in an agency that's not a historical tradition agency or something? It's like ridiculous. So when I took my immigration test, there were 3 branches of government, not 3 plus the Federal Reserve, plus Amtrak, plus the Post Office, plus the Labor Relations Board. All these boards, they're not independent. They exist under the executive branch, or not at all. And really, not at all. Chubby, what's up? White House says, you might have committed mortgage fraud. Looks bad, so you're fired for cause. Cook's defense lawyer says, no, you're poopy pants and we can't hear you. Plugs their ears in their fingers and says, la, 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 which is true. They don't seem like they have a lot of good arguments in this one because of the mortgage fraud, you know. Not ideal. Hey, what's up, Bucky's as Rome says, Mike Johnson says Trump was a federal informant. What? That's an interesting one. From Alternet? That's interesting. Interesting. Thank you for that one, Bucky's is Rome, from Alternet. We got this one from Dan Sundin says, you take so much time to investigate such that the statute of limitations have run out as well. Yeah, you just keep going and going, or her appeals take 4 years, and by the time the appeals are up, Trump's out of office, and so she just stays in position. Natalie Ray, what's up? E. Jean, everyone knows this is BS. Because ain't nobody out there who wants to knock the dust off. Oof, I mean, seriously, Natalie. Well, it was like 30 years ago, so she was a little bit younger, so a little less dusty, you know. Thank you, Natalie. Jay Marino, the Supremes and the Court of Appeals could really B-slap rogue judges, proverbial reversal slap, the old R slap. It's illegal. It's a legal maneuver. Says district court judges, if they order the case to be reassigned to another judge. Yeah, I mean, you mean like take the case away from Lisa Cook's sorority sister, maybe? You can't handle the case. You have to recuse. If they would do something like that. Man, I'm curious to see what they do, if anything, if we'll even ever know about it, about those so-called 12 anonymous judges who are illiterate, unethical cowards who breached their entire oath of office and now have committed cause for recusal, who are now still hiding behind their anonymity while they're presiding over cases on which they should be recused. It is completely unethical, and the Supreme Court, I hope, is investigating it. Sharpie guy, like, order the disclosure of the names or something. I don't think they'll do that because of the First Amendment, but maybe there's another way to find out who they were. Sharpie guy, the Democrat three-letter agencies in the Fed corruption is undeniable and astounding. And Trump is going to drain the swamp? I wish him luck and offer up my prayers. What are his chances of success, Rob? But all said, he has made a great start, right? Yeah, I am in the camp that I feel like we're having success. A lot of people are in the other camp. Like, that's all failure, everything's losing, there's disaster, all things. I'm not in that camp. I think that things are, more optimistic than pessimistic at the start. I am optimistic that, and I think this is kind of the precipice, like we're at the verge. So is Trump going to be successful, man? I don't know. If it's like a percentage, it's like, we're 50-50, I'd say, if I had to come up with a number. And I know that's like right cop out middle of the road, but I think that's right. If we advance, 3 years and there's no criminal indictments, that number is going to drop very quickly. Very quickly. I'll say, oh, well, there's really no progress made because there was no accountability for any of the people who committed the crimes. But we're still early in the game, so I think it's still, we're making some good progress, man. I mean, I think that what we're seeing on the border, what we're seeing with the culture, what we're seeing with the, I would say, evaporation of like the wokeism around the country. A lot of people, even Malcolm Gladwell, like there's a cultural shift that's happening majorly. And there's a lot of progress going on. We've seen some good indictments. We've seen some massive disclosures. We were very excited with what Tulsi Gabbard's doing. We also saw Kristi Noem. I mean, she's, solved the border, basically. It's like, it's outstanding. It's incredible. And we're excited about it. So I think that there is, like, if it's going to happen, we've got this window right now. We got like these 3.5 years left. But after that, I don't have a lot of optimism, to be honest. I mean, I think that there's going to be a tendency to revert back to the mean, which is going to be the old two-party system, because Trump is a phenomenon. We're living in a outlier timeline right now. But once Trump's gone, do we revert to the mean? So that's why I think we got to be very aggressive right now and solve all these problems aggressively right now. And I get tired of the whining about this. Like, why are we blowing up them? Well, because we're at war. That's why. It's because we're at war with them. That's why. They're killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. And I hear all these whiners about, blowing up these terrorists who are coming into our country. Why are we using our military to bomb everyone else, but not when it serves American interests? It makes no sense to me. So my point is, we got to be very aggressive with it and exercise power, utilize our power in the same, not criminal vein as the Democrats, but with the same tenacity, okay, with the same aggressiveness. And don't break the law, utilize the law, and just apply it appropriately, because as they told us, no one is above the law. Let's see, we got this from Biology Always Wins. It says, I wanted to say yesterday that your legal news is so much better than the South Park guy with the annoying nasal laugh. Sadly, most Americans have no clue what the judicial branch is doing. Thank you, Biology Always Wins. There's a South Park guy who does legal news. Well, some of those shows can have very good writing, but I agree with you. A lot of the voices make them hard to watch because they're just kind of weird and obnoxious. And you want to have a nice, soothing voice, not something that's going to be scratching your eardrums. So thank you, Biology Always Wins. We appreciate that. And I think that's right, Biology. Most Americans still think that the judges are like fair and independent and impartial. It's a very nice fiction. And I wish it was true. I actually wish it was a reality. I used to believe it was a lot more real 5 years ago than I do now. Now, I mean, we've seen it. Like, these judges are talking like, they don't have our backs. Why are you throwing us under the bus? They sound like morons. Like, honestly, they sound like idiots, like illiterate, which is a horrible thing to say, because you want them to be very competent people, but they don't even have any emotional maturity. Their IQ is low. Their EQ is low. Many of them are not even born here. And I'm just tired of pretending like we have to honor them and have reverence for them. Okay. They're corrupt partisan hacks, and somebody's got to say it. So we'll do it. Leonard, does anybody believe that Brandon was actually aware of more than a few of the pardons that he approved? I don't think so. I mean, it doesn't even sound like he was in the meetings as far as we can tell. So that evidence is pretty sparse. And then when you come in and you say, was Joe Biden at the meeting with you? They say, I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I can't answer that question. How come? What's up? Reviant says, how can you pardon when there's no charges? Couldn't Trump just pardon all his supporters for any past, current, and future crimes? So I don't think you can do future crimes, but you can do past crimes. And I'm pretty sure Jimmy Carter, didn't he like do all of the, I haven't looked into this issue a lot, but yeah, Proclamation 4483. He issued unconditional pardons to all Americans who evaded the draft, right? This is what he did. And so I think this is also an interesting one. Like, it's a proclamation. Draft evasion was common. It's like an amnesty. So it's an executive order. So did they all get pardons? Like the people who were charged? Did he review them all individually? Right? It's an interesting thing. So, yeah, who knows? So Trump could. I mean, Trump did pardon all the J6ers, but I would imagine he reviewed all of those independently. B-Man, and of course, absolutely nothing will happen from B-Man. We hope that something does. We know these are difficult actions to take for bureaucrats against themselves, but we'll stay optimistic. Thank you, B-Man, for the dono. Biology always wins. What's up? Hey, Rockin' Rob, can you do a short to shout out my amazing hubby? Heck yeah! Husband Biology always wins. He had an ER open heart surgery 2 years ago. Man, his aorta tore on the table. I'm 56 years old. Today, we've been married for 39 years. That's as long as I've been alive. That's a long time, Biology. That's amazing. Shout out to your husband. Hopefully he's recovering well. I don't know what, he may be all past that, but shout out to surviving open heart surgery and for sticking around with us. We love you. Husband Biology always wins. We're glad you're here. And Biology, thanks for the donos and for being here. Shout out to your husband. Doan, McGonagall's already doing time for taking $250,000 from the Albanian government. He's as crooked as a dog's hind leg, says Doan. Yeah, and shameless. I mean, just a criminal through and through. Mr. Spock, what's up? Welcome aboard. We'll see you on the members only after party today. And Dennis Madera says, will it do any good to impeach rogue judges in the House if we do not have the Senate votes to remove them? I think so. Yeah, Dennis, I agree that maybe the removal portion will be problematic. But if you start impeaching them, then I think they might correct their records. Like you don't want to be an impeached judge. The judges who are impeached are, it's like an honor destruction. Although they may not care about that. So the only thing that may matter to them is the raw exercise of power. But I still think, the House should, 2/3 to remove somebody is a tough task. So it's unlikely that that's going to happen. But remember, part of the process is the punishment. So they need to be held accountable. And we should have hearings in the House of Representatives on this and force the Democrats to vote. Force them to come out here and explain why these judges are legitimate. And you can have hearings on it and just put them through the process. And they can come in here and we can do the whole thing. Thank you for that, Dennis. So Congress needs to flex. Congress doesn't flex at all. They look like pathetic babies with no muscles at all. Get working out. Start lifting some weights and do something, right? Exercise your check and balance. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. And A lot of that's happening right now. So, my friends, thank you for these amazing donos and for being here. Of course, we're grateful for you. Thank you for subscribing to our channel if you haven't already done so. We're going over to our members only after party right now. So if you're a YouTube member or a locals member, hang tight. We'll see you for a little bit. We'll debrief, take some additional comments, see what's happening on this lovely Friday. But my friends, we'll pause here for the day. So we won't be back this afternoon because we covered some seriously good ground today. And I think we hit most of the highlights on the day. So we'll leave it there and we'll come back on Monday. Now, before we wrap it up, want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. Big shout outs to Carrie B for clipping for us, K Bean, John, Donut, Neuro D, Dog Digger, Janek, Jigam, Just Rhonda, and Elliot, all keeping things nice and orderly around here, and we're grateful for you. But my friends, we'll pause here for the week. And we want to wish you the best weekend you can possibly imagine. Members will also be back for the Saturday stream tomorrow. So come join us tomorrow on Saturday if you're a member. Otherwise, my friends, thanks once again for being here. We, of course, are coming back here next week to get into it again. And before we do that, I want to wish you a tremendous weekend. I hope that you're out there, you're getting some vitamin D, getting some fresh air, spending time with friends, family, the people that we love, doing something good and exciting for yourself so that when we return on Monday, we are restored and ready to go. And we can't wait to do it because when we come back on Monday, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful weekend, my friends. Sleep very well. We'll see you right back here on Monday. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chatting line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through the scripted ruse. Together we are watching the watchers shine in the light. Watching the watchers defending what's right. Watching the watchers stay each night together.